and the Crimson Finch, and you can see the distribution maps there, just highlighting where they're from. So 2 northern Australian species and a southern there. And the other one is the Beautiful Firetail, which is a more recent acquisition for me. I'd just like to share some of my experiences. That was really weird. And but one of the interesting things I discovered was the 3 different, there's 3 different races of the Beautiful Firetail, which wasn't something that I was aware of. And I'll talk more about that later. Now, I live in South Australia, so a lot of my observations in the wild have occurred with the Samueli subspecies over in the south. But there's, my wife saw this the other night on the computer and she said, "Who's the kid?" Because I'm a school teacher. And I said, "Look, that's me." I think it was about 1977, possibly. And I'm in front of my second aviary there. And, you know, I've been on a bit of a journey, like I think all of you could relate to, and going to meetings at the Flinders Street ballroom, where there would be 300 people at a meeting like this. And in South Australia in the 70s, it was the same. There were 200 or 300 people. I don't know what it was like here in the 70s, but it's kind of I suppose it's just a reminder of the journey that we've all come on, and the mentors we've had along the way. And I'll talk about that a bit later on. But to the present day, look, this is where I live. So there's the city of Adelaide, if you know Adelaide. The parklands are 1 kilometre from the CBD, and I'm just out of the CBD. So I live on a suburban block. That's my house there, over here. And this is the aviary complex here. So it's an 800 square metre block. And the aviaries basically go across the back perimeter. The shelters and the walkway are covered, and the aviaries are fairly open. There's 50% open for the vegetation to grow. And then this structure over here is like an attached shed, which has become pretty much the insect room, but also the lawnmower room and the wheelbarrow and all that. So just my aviaries came about. I've lived here since 2016, and the aviaries were built in 2017. And do you want to step over here? So I'm just in for the people at home. Fantastic. And look, there's myself. I am a rock star. I play in a band called the Painters and Dockers. We had our 40th anniversary tour last year, and we did 2 national tours. We came to Sydney and played the Factory Arts Centre in Marrickville. And I've also played with Midnight Oil, Paul Kelly, and lots of other bands. So I've done that as well as a teacher. But the reason I've thrown this in is the saxophone player is Mick Morris, and he is a builder extraordinaire. He does sort of the high-end quality house builds and renovations. And we've been in the band together for 41 years now. And I remember in my first couple of years in the band, he came to my place in Moonee Ponds, Victoria, and he looked at my aviaries that I'd built myself, and I was pretty proud. And he just put his hand on my shoulder and said, "David, one day I'll build you some aviaries." Anyway, he lives in Adelaide. So, because the rest of the band's from Victoria. And so we set about it. His son was an architect. So we drew up some plans. I'd just sold my house in Torquay, Victoria, and put some money aside. So I was able to sort of, and I wanted to do it properly. When I lived in Torquay, I built some aviaries. I think Peter Phippen had seen them many years ago. But I was always worried about getting a knock on the door from the council. And so I wanted to do it properly. I wanted to make sure it was completely rodent-proof forever and so forth. So we got council approval. We got some plans drawn up. We got serious plans drawn up with the electricals and all that, because we wanted to make sure that this was going to be state of the art. While this was happening, I was big on vegetation, making sure that we had lots of plants growing in there, because keeping the birds for me is 50% of it, and creating the habitats the other 50%. So it was really important to have both. So lots of lamandra, wattles, especially Acacia paradoxa, that really nasty prickly one, but finches love nesting in it. And lots of the grasses, the poa species and saltbush. So demolition started. We got rid of the old shed and the water tank that was down the back third of the block, and got it cleared, and then got the foundations put in. And it was really built like you'd build a house, something quite serious. So there were deep foundations and deep slab. And the day the concrete trucks came, I couldn't help my excitement. I hadn't had birds for about 2 years, so it was a good break, and I was really, really keen to get back into it. So the slab and the walls came up. These bits were going to hold soil for the vegetation. There was going to be aggie pipes here, so drainage, so that no matter how much rain, the water would drain out and down through the storm pipe. And then the other consideration was the increase in summer temperatures, and making sure it was cool enough in summer. So insulation, we use Colour Bond, and we use this product VersaClad for the ceilings. So it's basically made up of polystyrene and Colour Bond, and it's got tin on the underside, so you get a really neat, clean finish. And that would keep vermin out, because I believe vermin get into your aviaries from above, probably more so than they do from digging in. So it was important to make sure that they couldn't get in, and no vegetation around the aviary so that they could climb up. But it had a really nice, neat finish. It clicks together. It's often used in outdoor entertaining areas in houses. And when you use this product, you don't need to create the frame. It just clicks together, and it's got quite a strong, you could walk on it quite easily. And then the internal walls were all ply with these battens. And the idea for the battens was there's a space there, so you could then put your brush behind it. And so lots of security for the birds, lots of brush. I don't use perches. I don't use perches at all, no dowel. It's all branches, and completely, so that I don't want to see a row of birds in a line. I want them to be in a more natural setting. This was the walkway. And so there was access to all of the aviaries from drawers. And basically the design would have 6 aviaries, 4 breeding aviaries and 2 holding aviaries. There's all the paraphernalia that we bird keepers accumulate. And so running water and an old dishwasher that someone was getting rid of, we threw that in. And so forth, and space for holding cages. And more recently, I've got these new holding cages from birds, made out of plastic, and they're fantastic for keeping clean. So I'd highly recommend those. For trapping out birds, each aviary has a little slit there. I can open it up, and then I can chase the birds into that walkway. Now that walkway is about 12 meters long, so you don't want to be wielding a net there. So I would drape this curtain of mesh across a section, and then I could net the birds in that section. So that's one of the main mechanisms for getting birds out of the aviary. And I'll just go through the 4 main aviaries. This one's 6 meters by 4. And when it's planted out, it ends up with lots of little places for the birds to nestle in. This is the second aviary, and the next three breeding aviaries are 4 meters by 2.5 meters wide. And there's a great plant growing in this aviary called the Taiwanese rice plant, and it just creates these fantastic branches and perches for the birds to use, and they really respond well. And the leaves are so large, they're like umbrellas. So when it rains, the birds just get underneath those leaves. And then if they become soiled, the leaves have a short lifespan, so they just recycle quite quickly. And those leaves can get quite big. And that's the leaf on the right. And that's the third aviary. I use eucalyptus mulch as the substrate on the floor of my aviaries, and it allows good drainage. It harbours some insects for the birds to forage, especially if you're keeping soft bills. And 1 metre of each flight starts off with cement. So the cement from the walkway goes 1 metre into the aviary, because in that part of the aviary, you're not going to grow plants. So people often say, should we use concrete or soil in our aviaries? I would say use both if you can. And that's the fourth breeding aviary, and it sort of features a lot of salt bush. And so that's I'm finding the beautiful firetails really love grazing on the salt bush. And these are the two holding aviaries. And often we just assume a holding aviary has to be a box with a perch down the back and all the birds go in it. But of the holding aviaries are vegetated as well. The feed trays come out, and there's just sort of a range of the sorts of foods that they'd be given. I think there's a close-up. That's probably the staple for all my finches. It's something I've fed out for the last 20 years, probably longer, 30 years. It's basically soaked in or sprouted seed, and it's I use 3 seeds only. I use white millet, red panikin, and plain canary. In Victoria, whatever they sell as yellow panikin isn't digestible by the birds. They just don't eat it. Whatever they sell as Jap millet in Victoria and South Australia is, again, a no-no. So they're just 2 seeds that I don't bother with. And because I've got Neophemas rock parrots, I feed sprouted grey sunflower, which they love. And the beautiful firetails love that too, oddly enough. Lebanese cucumber, I think a lot of people do that. And chopped greens, whatever's available. So it could be choy sum, bok choy, silver beet, spinach, and a vitamin supplement, which Multivit is one of the products available. And for me, that's a staple. That's every day of the year and year in, year out. And I think if that alone, with the dry seed, will sustain in good health the birds. A bit of live food will sort of help those that require it. And the live food, mealworms, there'll be lots of you that are familiar with mealworms, and hands up if you produce your own at home. Oh, not many, a few. Okay, yeah. In the shed, I've just created this behind those pieces of ply are just some tubs where I can have my mealworm trays and also crickets that I breed. And they're basically just produced on, can you see there's some green mats here? And they're the reptile mats that you get from pet stores, and that just generates the heat. And then they're closed into the little cabinet. And so even during our very cold weather, I can keep that to at least 20 degrees, if not a bit warmer. So it keeps them cycling right through the year. And that's just a close-up of thermostat that's got some dirty spider webs on it and so forth. And just a quick look at crickets. If you haven't tried breeding crickets, they're actually really easy, a lot easier than mealworms, a lot faster to produce. And things like, for me, it's almost a secret ingredient for Pictorella success and breeding them. I don't do termites. I think being from southern Victoria, they were hard to get. So my whole journey in aviculture has been without termites. So I'm not about to start using it, but they work really well. And so they do their thing there. And that's the substrate. That's just moistened with water, the peat moss, and the adult crickets lay their eggs in that. And once a week, I take those containers out of the breeding crickets and place that in a new container. And then about 10 days later, there's these tiny pinhead crickets. And within 3 or 4 weeks, you've got really large larger crickets that you can feed off. The Pictorella's like to be fed small to medium-sized crickets. Weavers, on the other hand, prefer the larger ones. And then there's the flies. Do many of you do flies in New South Wales? Yeah. The guy who put these together is Craig Smealy from Geelong, and he deserves some sort of avian medal, because I think it's revolutionised finch keeping. It's made it quite possible to have an endless supply of live food 24/7 for your birds, and for a lot of birds, it's greatly beneficial. Oh, Craig Smealy, if I had a glass of wine, this would be for you. Can we give him a clap? Let him hear you here. And there's a close-up of the maggots too. And I remember my father being horrified when I started bringing maggots home. He'd come over to my place and just look at it. But those of you that have done it, you get over that quite quickly, don't you? But your wives never do. And the best form of live food is your planted aviary and your substrate on the floor so that they can fossick around. So there's certainly, we have lots of warm nights. I did in Victoria and also in South Australia where the termites take wing, and you can see the birds picking off lots of bugs off the wire. Water's just on a timer, nothing special there. I use these little ponds that you get from Bunnings, and they're all fed there. The overflow goes into a drain, which goes to the stormwater. So there's not that extra water. So try to keep although the aviaries are open and the aviaries get wet, they drain really well. And then everyone's got different ways of worming their birds. I tend to do it every 3 months, the beginning of each new season, summer, winter, autumn, spring, and use a couple of products mixed together, Baycox, or in this case, Toltravet for the coccidiosis, and Moxidectin Plus for worming, and do that when there's a dry spell and it's not too hot. But I would be consulting with your avian vet. There's a caveat there, and but I've been able to worm and do this when birds have got chicks in the nest. There's absolutely no qualms. I have heard people say they've had issues with parrot finches, and it might be because they drink more water than other finches, and that might have an impact. But the other thing is predator control. Just and I think we've all learned this probably the hard way. You've got to keep the rats and the mice out. You've got to try and keep the hawks away, and so forth. So do many of you use the gaze balls? Yeah, I've got these gaze balls. This is for birds of prey. You put one on each end of your aviaries, and then if there's a collared sparrowhawk or a goshawk, as they fly in, they see their own reflection and they think that the territory has been taken up, and then they move away quickly. So since I've put these up, I haven't had any visiting hawks where I did prior. And there's also, whoops, a hot wire. Whoops, one back. A hot wire here. And that's just to keep birds, possums, rodents, whatever. If anything gets up there, it gets a friendly zap. And just to please move on. And then there's the old decoy owls that they use on boats and ships. Do they work? I don't know, but they look okay. So I've got them up there. And there's even, and it looks, this round thing is a rubber snake. We've even got rubber snakes up there. So just a few little things that might help keep the rodents away. My big message is identify the species that you do well with, because they're the ones you stick with. And there's too many aviculturists whinge and complain when they've got an aviary full of something and something's breeding. But that's a cause for celebration. You're doing something right. That species suits you. That's the one to stick with. For me, it's been these three over the last probably 30 years. And so they're the species I'd like to continue to maintain in my aviary because they seem to do well within my aviaries and the way I'm managing them. So, and what I'll do is I'll go through those three species now. Diamond Firetails, how many people have got those? Yeah, a few of you. Yeah, fairly popular bird. That beautiful red rump, have you seen them in the wild? A few people. And as they fly away from you, you see that flash of red. And one of the Dreamtime stories of the First Nation people is that the first Diamond Firetails were actually a man and a woman who wanted some fire, and they wanted to steal the fire from the woman who owned the fire of the world. And they had to creep up to the fire while she was asleep. And the idea was to grab that fire and to take it away so that they could cook and they could keep warm. And as they took the fire and they left, one of them stood on a twig and it woke up the lady who owned all the fire of the world. And she was filled with rage. How dare they try and steal my fire? And she picked up 2 grass tree stems and broke them off and put them into her fire. And she threw them both with all her fury and might at the man and the woman as they were running into the bush. And each spear penetrated the back of the man and the woman. And the Dreamtime magic turned them into the first firetail finches, and then they flew off into the bush. And so it's one of the amazing stories. They're an absolute beautiful bird. This is a textbook cock bird. And when you're sexing these guys, you have some birds that are definite cocks. You have some that are definite hens, and there's a few that are always a bit tricky to tell. DNA sexing can help, but you can, for me, this is textbook. It's got this high forehead here and the stance, it stands upright, and the beak is this deep, rich maroon color. And then this hen here, she's not as upright. She's cherry pink because she's in breeding condition. She's got a flatter head, less distance from the head to the top of the eye. And in good light, the rump is a slightly different color. His rump is a lot brighter. Like all the grass finches, but particularly diamond firetails, they love seeding grasses. They can't get enough of them. And then when they've finished eating those seeding heads, they'll take them up and they'll build a nest out of them. And the nest, the seeding grasses also help form their courtship display. So this one's holding one in that typical pose that he's about to start courting his hen. This is a photograph I took in the wild of one near Murray Bridge, and it's got the long stem there. Now, in the aviary, you can see the cockbird with the stem. He bends almost at right angles and he starts bouncing on that perch. And so they love having bits of dead branches that have got a bit of bounce in them. And so he'll jump up and down and the hen will come and alight next to him, just like she is in that photograph there. But you never see them copulate because it must happen in the nest. But I haven't seen them copulate. The male is the only one that will dance with it. Yep. Yep. So if you see that behavior, you know that's a cockbird. And when I first started with this species, I had 9 birds and all with a different leg color and a little exercise book. And when I saw the one with a green ring jumping up and down, I wrote in my book, male, green. And a month later, I saw another one do it and wrote down male. At the end of 12 months, I had 9 males. And they hang together like pairs and they chase each other like pairs and they build roosting nests. And so the whole time I had all this anticipation, but it was never going to happen. So, so just knowing that behavior was able to clear that up. They adore feathers. If you throw a single feather in, they'll come down to your feet and take it. Or if you've got visitors coming and you want to show off your birds, throw a handful of feathers onto the ground, and when your visitors arrive, they'll be scurrying around with feathers. One thing that's not documented is in between clutches, the cockbird drives the hen savagely, like your parrot finches. And I used to assume it was one pair, one hen chasing a hen or a cock chasing a cock. And then I worked out, no, it wasn't. It was the mated pairs. And so if you're seeing diamonds really chasing each other savagely, that's your bonded pair. And he's getting her in condition. I've bred them successfully in single pairs. You can do that. But these days, I tend to have 2 to 4 pairs in an aviary, and they do really well that way as well. Young birds, you can hear young birds from 3 days, so they're very, very vocal. So when I had those 9 cockbirds, I'd always be straining to see if I could hear anything, and obviously didn't. Once I finally got hens, yeah, after 3 days, you could hear them. They do mind tolerate nest inspection, and there's lots in references saying don't go near their nest or whatever. The instinct to breed with a good pair of birds is huge, and if you lose them the next day, it's because of something else, I think. But you'll hear them at 3 days. They fledge usually really well developed at about 24 days. Strong flies, and they look just like that. That would have been a day or 2 out of the nest, and they're very, very noisy. You won't miss the fact you've got young diamonds from what I've seen if you're around your aviaries often enough. And they'll feed the chicks as you enter the bird room. They know the food's coming. They feed the chicks. This one's been out of the nest probably 2 weeks. The beak is just starting to go red there. And this is at about 6 to 7 weeks. This is a good time. You can remove them from the aviary when they're showing a bit of red on their beak. And this is a great time to buy them. If you're sourcing stock, that's the age. That's the look you want. You don't want to get a fully coloured bird. You don't know what you're getting. You want that. And don't worry about what sexes they are. Just get them, and then they'll work out the sex ratio, and you'll be fine. This is 9 weeks, and by 10, 11 weeks, they're fully coloured, just like the adults. This is in the wild near Minato, and there's a great spot where they come in. If you sit by the pool, they come and drink, and just a great bird to see in the wild. Number two, how are we going? You all right? Not too tired? Not putting you to sleep? Is that all right? Okay, the Crimson Finch. I was downright angry about this species because everything I read in the 70s by reputable writers talked about how they were murderous, how they call them blood finches. They're not called blood finches for nothing. Or, yeah, they'll kill your scarlet-chested parrots and so forth. But I've found it's nothing further than the truth. And there may be the odd rogue bird out there, but and the reason I was angry is because I probably spent, I've been in aviculture for 50 years. Yep, 50 years. And probably the first 30 years, just under 30 years, I didn't get these guys ever. I wouldn't have dreamt about it because of the reputation. And that's why I'm angry, because my journey with these guys could have started a lot earlier. And I started off with a single pair, and they did really well. And I mixed them with all the red finches you could think of, from fire finches to St. Helena's to anything with red. There was no aggression. They are the king bird of the aviary. Mark my words, they will be the first at the feed tray, and they will possibly shoo a bird away here or there, but in terms of being savage or killing another bird, that's something I haven't seen. And I've also kept them in colonies as well. But a magnificent bird, very wax-like appearance. And there's your adult male there, and there's the adult female. One of the only Australian finches with the flickering tail like a cordon bleu that flickers sideways, and it bends when they're sitting on a nest. So this hen's bends on a nest, and her tail is bent there. And I think that the hens are quite beautiful, and they've got beautiful white spots. And this cockbird's been on the nest. You can see his tail. And again, like the Diamond Firetail, they love feathers and they love seeding grasses. They're huge on those. But they also are very, very fond of live food. Now, I've bred Diamond Firetails without live food, but they do prefer live food when they've got young, and it's usually maggots. The odd pair will have a preference for mealworms, but generally maggots are fine. With the crimsons, different pairs, again, some prefer the maggots, others prefer mealworms. And so you'll work that out, and you'll know when the young hatch, because they'll be going for the live food in a big way, and they'll eat the Lebanese cucumber to the skin. And so they really love that Lebanese cucumber when they've got young. That's a typical fledgling when they come out, a brown bird, well feathered, well developed. The red is starting to form on the beak, and you can see this is it's got a black belly there. It's got a bit of red there, so that's a young cockbird. A young hen might end up with a white spot on a grey feather. You'll know that will be a hen. This one is a young cockbird. It's got the red feather, a white spot on the red feather. Another young cockbird there. This was a weird one. This cockbird, his face coloured first. Usually the face is the last part to colour in the cockbirds, but this one just got it the other way around. There's a hen there. But you know how the Cuban finch, how many of you keep Cubans or have kept Cubans? Lots. You know, the Cuban finch comes and investigates everything. And they come to the wire and, what have you got for me? That's what these guys are like. They are they're not going to hide. If you've never kept crimson finches before, they will delight you with how welcoming they are and how interested they are in you. And they'll come to the wire. They almost talk to you. And they're one of those birds that do talk to you. I've got young in the nest. They've just hatched. And if you watch and listen, you'll get that message. This this was a group of 5 pairs in one aviary. And so, and again, everything that you'd read would make you think that this would be a no-no, but it certainly can work. I've found the most productive pairs are by themselves, though, as in terms of crimson finches. And in this case, you'll get 2 or maybe 3 of those pairs breeding, but not all of them. But a beautiful, beautiful bird. And the third bird, the Pictorella, you know, it sort of alluded to how I had that cockbird the first time. They're the only heteromunia from the genus Heteromunia in the world, and evolution suggests that they've diverged off from the quail finches of Africa. So they're quite unique, and they are unique in a lot of ways. This is the hen bird. She's got each white feather is bordered with a black rim. So if you've got a young bird and it's got 1 feather, check that feather. If it's white to the end, it's a cockbird. If it's got a black edge, it's a hen. They take a long time to colour up, the best part of the year. And there's the cock and the hen just side by side there. Really sleek looking bird. And again, they adore seeding grasses. They couldn't give a rat's about white feathers. They will look at you blankly. But seeding grasses, you'll win their heart. Great legs for clambering on grass stalks. And they love to bathe. So when the water dishes are flushed for a couple of minutes each day, they're the first bird down having a bath. And this one, whenever I'd scrape the dishes, the Pictorellas were really keen on eating the algae growing on the base of the dish. And it wasn't just once or twice. This was something that they did frequently. And I've noticed chestnut-breasted finches in the past doing this as well. So I have a fish pond, which has got way too much algae, and I harvest that and put some fresh algae in a dish on the feeding tray each day. This is one of the unique traits. It's the mating display. So rather than bobbing up and down on a branch, the courtship occurs on the ground. So they need a clear area on the ground. And I've only ever seen this happen on the concrete. I haven't seen them do it on the leaf litter. So I don't know if there's anything in that, but I'll just have another look. So he basically does circles around it and then he'll copulate. You don't see it often, but when they do it, you just realise they are unique. No other Australian finch does that. And often I've seen young birds watching the cockbird, the adult cockbird doing it. And I just wonder if is there a bit of learning going on as well. Fledglings tend to spend the first few days on the ground. Sometimes if you disturb them, they'll shoot up and they hit their heads on the wire roof. But they might lose a few feathers, but otherwise they're okay. And I found the nest size in early clutches can be as many as 7. And with each clutch, it seems to drop. And the biggest clutches I've found over the years have been in the adult breeding pair not even being in full colour. So we don't need to wait for these guys to get into full colour. Remember, they take about a year to colour up properly. So putting them together at about 6 or 7 months of age, you could set yourself up for some breeding success of bigger nests. And there's just a shot of the beautiful chick when they come out. They camouflage really well on the ground. This one, the beak has gone that horn colour, so this one's probably been out of the nest already 4 weeks. And this one, do you think it's a cock or a hen? Yeah, young cockbird. Okay, and the last species I want to talk about is a species I haven't got a great deal of experience with. My experience with this bird has only started in August last year, so it's almost a year. And I think it's one of those birds that I've always really, really dreamt of having. I've photographed them in the wild a fair bit, and I've always been mesmerised by them. And I just thought, look, if they were available, I would certainly give it a go. Now, David White and David Whaley in Victoria, agricultural colleagues of mine, have been breeding them successfully, so there was a chance. And it took about 12 months, but I finally was able to get a couple of pairs sent out. And there's just a reminder that there are the three different races. And if you ask me what the difference is, I couldn't tell you. I don't know, but quite interesting. This is in the wild. I find to photograph them, actually to see them, if I walk through the bush, I won't see one. I've got to find a puddle where I know that they exist, usually where there's Alocasia she oaks around, and I sit on the camp chair and I'll wait, have a few snacks with me, check the phone when I get bored, and so forth. And then within an hour, the resident beautifuls will come out, and I can get a few photographs of them. And this is a place called Cox's Scrub in South Australia, and juveniles often appear in November, which coincides when our seeding grasses have been. Our seeding grasses are just appearing now, and so I'd say that will trigger them. And so there's the she oak seed. That is one of their favoured diets in the wild. One of the main driving forces for me getting beautiful firetails, besides the old, dream of having them, I just thought there wasn't enough on the permanent record. There weren't enough articles on or of experiences with the species. Now, the book you've got here, this is Cayley's Australian Finches. This is 1932, and there's an excellent chapter on the husbandry and some experiences on keeping the Diamond Firetail from several agriculturists, mostly in New South Wales and Tasmania at the time. And except for this piece, I think there was a piece written by David Myers in the 80s and Brian O'Gorman in the 80s. But otherwise, there's nothing on the permanent record. And I thought, I need to keep them because I need to record everything I can find out and just put it on that permanent record, not for my own glory, but for the prosperity of future aviculturists, keeping the species. So the day I went to the airport to pick up the freight box with 2 pairs, the excitement was, you can see one looking out there. I couldn't wait to get home and one of the hens was gone. I was like, oh, okay. And this stuff happens. This is not anybody's fault. This is some of the trials and tribulations. But the permanent record needs to know, warts and all, the problems encountered. Okay, so then I had 3 birds, and oddly enough, one of the cockbirds grabbed a piece of grass just like your Diamond Firetails and was parading around the aviary, the next day. It was recommended to me not to put them in. Normally when I get a bird, it goes into the holding cabinets for at least a week, let them settle down, worm them and so forth. But it was recommended, look, put them straight into the aviary. So I took the advice, and the next day I noticed the other hen had some sort of injury, and unfortunately she was lost the next day. So I was down to 2 cockbirds, But the two cockbirds really prospered. They did really well. And as anticipated, they adored the seeding grasses. So the seeding grasses were vigorously taken. So one pair went in with a couple of pair of Pictorellas, and this was just a few days afterwards. At the moment, I house them only with 2 pairs of Pictorellas and nothing else. So, but yeah, but mesmerising, beautiful to see. And so I sort of went overboard with the seeding grasses and got all the Poa annua out of the lawn. You know, Poa annua, that winter grass, this stuff, the winter grass that grows in your lawn, and pulled it all out and put that out at each day. And I just wanted to make sure that I could maintain these 2 cockbirds. And look, they did really well. So, and to this day, those 2 cockbirds are looking great. This one's eating kangaroo grass, the Metatriandra. So that's one of the native grasses. In terms of seed preferences, I wasn't sure which seed they would go for. And I always suspected if they eat the casuarina seed, it must be really fine seed. But they love your bog standard plain canary. That's the number 1, plain canary. And then red millet comes second. And they've hardly touched, I think, the white millet. So it's the plain canary and the red panikin. And then I did a video and captured one eagerly taking sprouted grey sunflower. So I thought, well, there goes the idea of large seed being a no-no. This one's in an aviary with a lot of salt bush, and I'll get back to that. So there's the 3 seed varieties offered. I did offer some casuarina seeds, nuts, and they shed the seeds once they've been cut. I haven't seen them eat it, so I don't think that seems to be as important, but I was putting in the Poa annua and any seeding grasses I'm getting. At the moment, the seeding grasses have kicked in Adelaide, so they're getting it each morning and night at the moment. So I was able to source 2 more hens. Would you believe it? I was able to get 2 more hens. They were freighted. They arrived in tip-top condition. This time I thought, no, they're going in the cabinet. They're not going straight in the aviary. So they went into the cabinet with a bit of salt bush and a bit of for cover, as well as a bit of green browse. And they really are browsers. And so there was 1 hen placed here, 1 hen placed there, and they stayed there a week. And then I didn't want to just release the hen in with each cockbird, because I was worried the cockbirds had been there a couple of months and those cockbirds might drive these new hens around. So I caught out both cockbirds, swapped aviaries. So the cockbird that was in aviary 2 went to 4 and 4 went to 2, and then I put the hens in. And there was no issues with aggression, and the birds in the salt in the aviary with saltbush just started grazing on the saltbush, and so I thought, oh, that's a positive step. The other surprise was their fondness of corn on the cob, and just getting the juice out of the corn on the cob. So that was another little thing. Then I thought, oh, this is great. With a bit of time, a nest was built. And so around December, I think it was Christmas Day, I noticed a nest being built. And it was your typical dome nest with a side entrance tunnel made of a lot of living grass, a lot like a Diamond Firetail nest. And at this time, and even to this day, the hen is always missing in both pairs. It seems if they're incubating, it's the hen who does it alone. I can't prove that. I can't see inside the nest, but there's always one missing, and it's always the hen. And every now and then she'll come and join him and eat some seeding grasses, and then she vanishes again. So whether the hen alone incubates is still to be sort of confirmed. But to the and I was keeping meticulous records. And at the point when if they did hatch, I was hoping to hear them. I didn't hear anything. I went overseas for 2 weeks over February. And when I came back, nothing had fledged. And nothing occurred. And I think we all know that feeling with finches when you're anticipating, and then it doesn't happen. So since then, the nest slowly fell apart. They've just rebuilt the nest in a new location now, and the seeding grasses are just being fed now. So we'll see how they go. Historically, they don't eat live food, according to the little bit of literature there is. So we'll watch that space as well. But coming back to that 13-year-old, 14-year-old, I think we're all on a journey. For me, the Beautiful Firetail is the latest journey. I'm going to maintain my core species, and I'm going to see what we can do with the Beautiful Firetail and to share the story, warts and all, as it occurs. So thank you very much.
Okay, so have we got any questions for David? You can't run away yet. No. All right. Okay. So look, before you run away, we've got to give you something. So here you go. Have a little certificate of appreciation and a bottle of something nice for you and a hat to remember us by. Oh, okay. Rightio. Let's shake hands if you can. There you go. Thank you very much. Got that? Good on you. All right, lovely. So all we're going to do is finish off for the night is have the raffle. So over to you, Joe. Do you want the microphone or are you going to just yell out loud? Well done. I forgot to announce the winner of the seed is Ben Lloyd today. Congratulations, Ben.
Say goodbye to all the people online. Bye, everyone online.
Thanks, Sam. Good night.